The ranch house sat quiet under a sky so wide, it felt like it could swallow a man's doubts whole. Inside, a single lamp burned low, its light flickering over rough timber walls and casting long shadows that refused to settle. The fire in the stone hearth had faded to orange embers, barely strong enough to hold back the cold that crept through the floorboards. Warren Reeves sat alone at the kitchen table, shoulders heavy, hands rough from years of work. In his fingers he held a single sheet of cream-colored paper, worn soft from being read again and again. His hands trembled as his eyes returned to the same line that had already changed his life. "I accept your offer of marriage. I will arrive on the afternoon stage, Tuesday next. Respectfully, Miss Elena Bowman." Outside, the November wind rattled the shutters and carried the lonely cry of a coyote across the open land. Warren folded the letter slowly and slipped it into the inside pocket of his vest, close to his heart. 6 weeks earlier, he had sent an advertisement to the Cheyenne Gazette, rewriting it 3 times before finding the courage to mail it. He had been honest, painfully so. A rancher seeking a wife for companionship. Prepared for hard frontier life. Unable to father children. He had expected silence. Maybe a polite refusal. He had not expected a woman to answer without pity or hesitation. Warren stood and walked to the window, pressing his palm against the cold glass. Tomorrow a stagecoach would roll into Casper, and on it would be a woman stepping into the life of a man who had stopped believing in second chances. He whispered into the empty room, asking God not to waste this mercy if that was what it was. Solitude had shaped Warren slowly, like wind shaping stone. His ranch stretched across 800 acres of Wyoming grassland, land earned with broken bones, frozen nights, and years of stubborn work. His house was large for a bachelor, sturdy and clean, but it was a house, not a home. He ate alone at a table built for 6. He slept on one side of a bed meant for 2, the other side always untouched. Some mornings he woke with his hand on an empty pillow, the ache sharp enough to send him back outside just to outrun it. 4 years earlier, a doctor in Laramie had told him words that settled into his bones. A childhood fever had left damage inside him. Children would never come. Warren had accepted it the way a man accepts drought or loss, quietly and without complaint. But the wound never healed. It followed him through every day of work and every night of silence. The thought that finally pushed him to write the advertisement came on a Sunday afternoon outside a small church near Casper. He watched a neighbor lift his young son onto his shoulders while his wife laughed beside them, heavy with another child. It was not envy that cracked his chest open, it was grief. That same evening, Warren went home and wrote the notice that would change everything. The letter from Elena Bowman arrived 3 weeks later, short, direct, steady. She was 29, used to work, with no family left, and no fear of a quiet life. His honesty about children did not trouble her. Warren read the letter until the paper softened in his hands before writing back. Now Tuesday had come. Warren stood in front of the cracked mirror, adjusting his collar again and again. He looked older than his years, his hair threaded with gray, his face lined from sun and wind. He pulled on his coat and hitched the wagon anyway. Casper was a raw, unfinished town, held together by mud and optimism. Warren pulled up in front of the stage depot, just as the coach stood steaming in the cold air. He scanned the small crowd, heart pounding. Then he saw her. Elena Bowman stood near the back of the coach, one gloved hand resting on a battered carpet bag. She wore a dark blue traveling dress and a small hat pinned to hair the color of wheat. She stood straight, careful and alert, not desperate, not defeated. When her eyes met Warren's across the crowd, something in his chest tightened. He approached, hat in hand. They stood a moment without speaking, the noise of the street fading around them. He said her name. She said his. Her voice was steady, though a tremor lived beneath it. Warren offered the wagon and took her bag. Their fingers brushed, and the small contact sent a jolt through him he had not felt in years. They rode in silence for the first stretch, the wagon creaking over the road. Warren kept his eyes forward, aware of her beside him, of the faint scent of soap and clean fabric. Elena watched him quietly, noticing the care in his movements and the gentleness he did not seem aware of. When they reached the ranch at dusk, the sky had turned soft violet. Warren helped her down, and this time neither pulled away quickly. Inside, Elena took in the house slowly. Plain, sturdy, clean. Order everywhere, as if chaos had been kept at bay by sheer will. Warren apologized for its simplicity. Elena told him it was more than she expected. They shared a quiet supper. The silence was heavy until Warren made a small, awkward joke about his cooking. Elena laughed, a warm sound that filled the room and caught him off guard. Afterward, she insisted on helping with the dishes. They worked side by side, careful and polite, learning each other's rhythms. That night, Elena lay awake in her room, heart racing, surprised by the kindness she had found. Across the hall, Warren stared at the ceiling, aware of her presence in a way that made sleep impossible. Days followed, and Elena settled into ranch life with ease. She rose early, filled the house with warmth, hung curtains, and placed wildflowers on the table. The house began to feel alive. Warren watched it happen with quiet wonder. One morning she asked to learn to ride. Warren saddled the gentlest horse he owned and helped her up. When the horse startled, and Elena nearly fell, Warren caught her instantly. Their laughter broke the tension, but the look they shared lingered longer than it should have. That night, both lay awake again, aware of something growing between them. Neither said it out loud, but both felt it clearly. Something fragile and dangerous had taken root in the quiet house on the Wyoming plain, and neither of them knew what it would cost to let it grow. November slid into December, and the cold deepened until it felt like it lived inside the bones. Snow piled against the barn doors, and the wind screamed across the open land like it was angry at being ignored. Warren worked longer days, breaking ice on the troughs and feeding cattle before dawn and after dark. Each evening he came back to a house that was warmer than it had ever been. Elena kept the fire fed, and the lamps trimmed. The smell of bread and stew greeted him at the door, and for the first time in years, Warren felt relief instead of exhaustion when he stepped inside. They moved around each other carefully, always aware, never careless. Their hands brushed more often now, passing bowls, sharing tools, steadying each other on icy steps. Neither spoke about it, but the air between them carried a quiet tension that did not fade. It grew. It waited. One evening in mid-December, the wind went still. The sky cleared, and the cold sharpened. Warren came in late, snow dusting his shoulders. Elena stood at the stove stirring beans, her back to him. The simple sight of her there tightened his chest. He reached past her for a mug, his arm brushing her sleeve. She froze. He froze. They turned at the same time, standing too close, the firelight flickering across their faces. "Are you all right?" she asked softly. "Fine," he said, but he did not step away. They ate, in near silence. After supper, Elena mended by the fire, while Warren stared into the flames. The quiet was no longer comfortable. It pressed in. Finally, Warren spoke. "Why did you answer my advertisement?" Elena set the needle aside. She looked at him steadily and told him the truth. About being nearly 30. About watching younger women build lives while she faded into the background. About the fear that something was wrong with her. Warren listened, his jaw tight, his hands clasped. When she finished, he told her his own truth. About the doctor. About believing himself broken. About writing the advertisement because he refused to lie. Elena's voice shook when she spoke again. She told him she had never been with a man, that she feared she might be barren. That she answered his letter because she thought it might not matter if the life they built stayed quiet. Warren crossed the room and knelt in front of her. He told her he did not care about children. He cared about her. He told her he was falling in love with her. Elena closed her eyes and leaned into his touch. She told him not to stop. Their first kiss was slow and careful, full of hesitation and longing. When they parted, both were shaking. Warren asked if she was sure. Elena said yes. He led her to his room, promising care, promising patience. That night, they came together not out of urgency, but trust. It was awkward and tender and overwhelming. When it was over, they lay tangled together, stunned by the closeness. After that, everything changed quietly. They shared a bed. They shared mornings and nights. They shared glances that said more than words ever could. January came hard and bright. The world outside stayed frozen, but inside the house, something had shifted. Warren could not stay away from Elena. He watched her move, listened to her breathe beside him at night, memorized her presence. It should have been perfect, but fear crept in slowly. Late in January, Elena woke one morning feeling wrong. Nausea rolled through her. She slipped from the bed and was sick in the washroom, rinsing her mouth before Warren woke. The next morning it happened again. And again. She told herself it was the winter, or the food, or exhaustion. But her body kept changing. Her clothes tightened. Her senses sharpened. Coffee made her ill. Bacon turned her stomach. She hid it as long as she could. She woke early to be sick in silence. She loosened the seams of her dresses at night. She wore her apron tight. Warren noticed anyway. He saw the way she tired, the way she dozed in the chair, the way she flinched at smells. When a traveling doctor came to Casper in early March, Warren asked her gently to be checked. Elena agreed. Fear coiled tight in her chest. She sat behind a curtain in the back of the general store while the doctor asked questions and examined her carefully. When he spoke, the words landed like a blow. She was with child. Elena walked out into the cold air, barely aware of the world around her. She climbed into the wagon without a word. Warren pressed her until she spoke. When she finally said it, he stared at her, stunned. Then joy cracked through him, sudden and fierce. He pulled her into his arms, laughing and crying all at once. But Elena's fear did not lift. That night she worried about whispers, about doubt, about shame. She feared Warren would one day wonder. She feared the world would judge them both. The fear grew until one night Warren woke to find her packing her bag. He stopped her, held her, swore he would never doubt her. He told her she was his wife and the child was his. He held her until she slept, one hand resting protectively on her belly. 2 weeks later, a letter arrived from the doctor who had once told Warren he was infertile. It admitted the diagnosis might have been wrong, that the methods had been flawed, that certainty had been misplaced. Warren laughed until he cried. He held Elena and told her he was never broken, that their child was his, that he would spend his life making sure the world knew it. But even as spring crept closer and the land began to soften, Elena's fear still lingered. She loved Warren. She trusted him. But the world had not always been kind to women like her. And though joy had found them, a final test still waited ahead. One that would ask how strong their love truly was. Spring came slowly to the Wyoming plains, testing the land before fully committing. Snow melted in patches, leaving the ground soft and dark. Green pushed up through dead grass, and the creek near the ranch began to run clear again. Elena's body changed with the season. By late March, there was no hiding her condition. Her belly rounded gently, her movements slowed, and her face softened in a way that made Warren stop and stare more than once a day. He watched her like a man, guarding something precious. When she cooked, when she rested, when she stood at the window with her hand on her belly, he felt awe settled deep in his chest. She was creating life. Their life. The miracle he had once been told would never happen. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sun sink low, Warren took her hand and held it for a long time before speaking. His voice was quiet but sure. "Marry me." Elena turned, confused. "We are married." "I know," he said, "but I want to do it right. I want witnesses. I want vows spoken out loud. I want the world to know I choose you, Not out of need, out of love. Tears filled her eyes. She nodded, yes. They planned a small ceremony by the creek. Elena sewed her own dress from white cotton she had carried for years without knowing why. Simple, modest, honest. She did not hide her belly. This child was part of their truth. On the morning of the wedding, the sky was clear and blue. Warren dressed in his best suit, hands shaking as he buttoned his shirt. He had faced storms, stampedes, and loss without flinching, but this made his knees weak. When Elena walked toward him beside the creek, sunlight in her hair and her hand resting on her belly, Warren forgot how to breathe. They spoke their vows plainly. No fancy words, just promises spoken from the heart. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Warren kissed her deeply, careful and proud. The small crowd laughed and clapped. Elena smiled through tears. That night, they came together not as uncertain partners, but as chosen family. Warren kissed her belly and whispered to the child inside, promising protection and love. Elena held him and believed him. Their son was born in September, strong and healthy, with Warren's dark hair and Elena's blue eyes. Warren cried openly as he held the baby. All the years of believing himself broken shattered in that moment. More children followed, a daughter, then twin boys. The quiet house filled with noise, laughter, and life. The ranch grew. The land prospered. But none of it mattered as much as the sound of children running through the halls and Elena humming in the kitchen. Years passed gently. Hair grayed, hands slowed. Love deepened. On warm evenings, Warren and Elena sat on the porch watching their grandchildren play. The land stretched wide and green before them. Warren held her close and whispered the truth he had learned too late but lived every day. Before her, he had only slept. With her, he learned how to dream. And the dream never left.